Today's episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn. Dunn is a progressive campaign agency that specialises in campaigning and community organising. We work with non-profit and community-based organisations, trade unions, progressive businesses and social democratic parties across the globe. Dunn develops community engagement and organising strategies to win campaigns both big and small. We train engagement staff, volunteers and organisers in leadership and power building, and we help leaders craft their own public narrative that tells a story that unites people and moves them to act together. And if you want to act to create change in your community in 2023, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. Today's episode is also brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. When you need support with a legal issue, it can feel daunting. That's why for over 100 years, Maurice Blackburn has been helping and guiding clients with their legal needs. They're here to help you when you need them the most, from workplace to medical injuries, class actions, occupational diseases, and wills and estates and planning. As Australia's leading plaintiff law firm, they have the local knowledge and the national network with the experience that you can count on. To find out more, simply go to mauriceblackburn.com.au. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust, lists that are up to date, phone banks that can change minds, emails that drive donations, events that will energize the community both online and offline, and text blasts that distill your message perfectly. The SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. And to find out more, simply go to swiftfoxcrm.com to win your next campaign. Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left politics and organising podcast, which is out every Friday, that dives into the progressive campaigns and the issues of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. And on today's episode, we are going to talk to Matt Knox, who is a TikTok political content creator. Matt has been doing this now for the better part of 2 years and has built up what I would call a very loyal and dedicated group of supporters and followers to his really, really engaging content. And we're going to have a chat to Matt today about, I guess, the work that he does, the content he creates, the reactions that he gets, and the role that TikTok plays in the social media space and how it can have an impact on the political debate. So looking forward to having a chat to Matt today. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube and Stitcher. And if you like the show, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify when you're done listening to today's episode, or leave us a review on Apple Podcast and Podchaser. And for all the updates, don't forget to follow Dunn Street on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Okay, let's get to today's episode. We're taping this one on a Wednesday afternoon on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And I'm joined by someone actually that I've been meaning to get on the show for some time, but just haven't been able to make it work. But I'm proud to say that he's joining us today. We all know him as PoggersMagoo. His parents know him as Matt Knox. Matt Knox, welcome to Socially Democratic.
Great to be here.
Now, we have kind of sort of been in the same room, because on election night for the federal election in May last year, when we did the live telecast with our comrades from Week on Wednesday, Van and Ben, they interviewed you on that glorious night when normality was restored to our great nation. The people of Australia had some sense and voted for the Labor Party. But in the way that the show worked, there was sort of like, it was like a T20 game of cricket. Like I just didn't know what was going on the whole time. But there was like 8-minute blocks where there was 8 minutes of Van and Ben interviewing someone. Meanwhile, David Finney and I are quickly scrambling through the AEC website trying to work out what to say. And then 8 minutes of us just making up shit on the spot. And then, Van and Ben getting ready for the next interview and back and forth. And so you were interviewed by Van and Ben, but at that moment there was something going on and I was like going, oh, I really want to listen to this because I really like what Matt does on social media, but I can't friggin' trying to work out what the fuck's going on in bloody Western Australia or something. Anyway, so I thought, well, easy way to fix that. Let's just get you on the show and have a bit of a yak. For those out there that don't know what you do, can you give us a bit of a background into what your work on social media?
So basically, I just started posting TikToks, really, I guess, from a pro-Labor perspective, about almost 2 years ago now. And yeah, I'll just comment on the news, politics, all of that, but through a pro-Labor perspective.
What was the genesis of this? What motivated you to start to use TikTok as a platform for your opinions?
So I was going through a Paul Keating binge phase on YouTube, and I didn't actually use TikTok at all. But my friend kept sending me TikToks and whatnot, and just about garbage. And I just punched in Paul Keating into the search bar just to see if there was any TikToks out there on Paul. Didn't think that there really would be, but yeah, I found all these sort of accounts that were commentating on Australian politics, but specifically from a pro-Labor perspective. And that seemed to actually be majority of the political landscape on TikTok was pro-Labor. And this was at a time where we'd just gone into that lockdown that was triggered from New South Wales, that the vaccine rollout, the stroll out, seeing the headlines and all of this sort of insanity with the media. I think it was a bit of a place of reason, as all these people kind of countering a lot of those silly narratives. And I saw that and I thought, that's pretty cool that people do that. Maybe I'll just have a little bit of a crack. Didn't really think much of it, actually. And yeah, next thing you know, you sort of start getting an audience. It was all very accidental, but that just sort of built up over time.
It's hysterical. So it's kind of like your COVID baby.
Yeah, it is my COVID baby.
Devil's work, idle hands, that kind of thing. Well, I mean, it certainly is. I mean, the first time I came across it, I was racking my brain during the week, actually, leading up to this episode, to try and work out when I first saw some of your content. I think I saw it on Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw one or two, and I was like, oh, this guy makes some sense. Like, I just didn't know who you were or anything. I was like, I was incredibly pro-Labor. Like, I was like, this is brilliant. Like, right in my wheelhouse, and the wheelhouse of so many others that listen to this show. But I was like, oh, this is good. This guy makes sense. But I didn't sort of follow you or anything. I just it was like a doom scroll kind of evening kind of thing. It was obviously true. And then maybe the third one popped up. This sounds so superficial by me. And it is. There was a post. I was like, there's that PoggersMagoo guy again. I'll watch that. This is good. And you start, I can't even remember what you were talking about, but maybe you're talking about red shirts or something, or I don't know what it was, but
yeah.
Next minute,
the Paul Sackle saga, Renee Heath.
That's what it was. That's right. And next minute you go, you know what you should do? You should listen to Socially Democratic. And I was like, what the fuck? And it completely took me by surprise. And I obviously shared it amongst my closest friends going, what is this? Is this a practical joke? Is someone putting me up to this? Anyway, but no, there was obviously, why did you choose that content, for example? Give us a sort of what's the mind hive of that, thinking, I'll do something on this?
That one was a while ago. I think just reading the piece, there might have been something in there about Matthew Guy being surprised about Renee Heath when that had sort of already come out in the news. And just sort of seeing Paul's jab at the red shirts as well thrown in there. It was all a bit ridiculous. And just tying all of that together and packaging it up and putting it out there. And that was just before the Victorian election campaign, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, I remember when I posted that thinking like this campaign's about to start as well. So let's see what the age does.
Did you get any reaction?
Yeah. But a lot of people were talking about Renee Heath actually, and the City Builders, that church group and whatnot. They had, I guess, local information on that group. So yeah. Okay,
let's so when you first did start posting it, what was the kind of initial reaction that you were getting, and did it surprise you in terms of what you originally sent out to do?
With that particular...
No, even right. Let's go back to the start. Let's go back
in general.
Yeah,
it did surprise me a lot, actually. Like how many people did support the Labor Party and did support getting a Labor government in. This was all before the federal election, so Scott Morrison was still Prime Minister. we're still waiting for vaccines, this bumbling clown running around embarrassing us around the world, all the rest of it. It did surprise me how much support there was out there. I think particularly because before I was quite cut off from politics, in a community sense. And just seeing all the people out there that do actually support a Labor government, that are pro-Labor, not sort of on the fence or trying to weigh up their options all the time and looking at the Greens and all of this. There is actually a huge swathe of people that support getting a Labor government in, that detest the Liberal Party as well. So it was interesting just to see, I guess, the amount of different kinds of people too. Like, it's not just young people on TikTok. There are a lot of older people. My audience is almost evenly sort of split between the age groups. That it slightly skews towards younger people, but it's just great. It's great to get into contact with people from all around the country, all different backgrounds. People from the Whitlam era on there. It's incredible.
Is it? I'm not an expert on TikTok by any stretch of the imagination. Is it a medium in which you can have dialogue? This is how bad I am. Can you leave messages underneath the TikTok? I'm assuming you can, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So that there is a character limit, which is fairly short, but people will leave comments. They'll leave multiple comments as well. It's not like it really inhibits anyone. But you can absolutely have a dialogue. You can also, if somebody makes something, you can stitch it, which is where they'll make a TikTok. The first 5 seconds of yours will play, and then they can go on to say what they want to say in return to you. If people see that, they can click on your one and go back to the source. So you absolutely can have a conversation on there or a debate, and people do.
It was interesting to hear you say that your audience was actually quite spread out across the age brackets. Naturally, I would have thought that it was very much targeted towards younger people, but you're obviously getting, Gen Xers and Boomers and everything else in between.
Absolutely.
Why is that, do you think?
I think it's just a growing, rapidly growing platform. I think it is the fastest growing platform. I do see it taking over your other social medias eventually. I think they all sort of have their place, but TikTok certainly where the growth is. There's only so many young people, they're already on there. So you get the older people coming in as well. I think in particular, though, with politics, ages are spread out. And there are people of all ages making political content on TikTok. It's definitely not just for young people. And it's great because you get a range of views from different generations and experiences as well. So it's good, definitely a good community.
Yeah. Do you find over the journey, certainly in the early stages, with what you're producing or the material, the content you're producing, that the platform has evolved and that there's more that you can do now that you couldn't do way back in the start?
I think so, yeah. It's also probably learning to use the platform, but it does change over time. It does what sort of trends, I think, changes a little bit, not a whole lot. You can just sit in front of a camera and talk. That's fine. That works really well a lot of the time. But you can also set different backgrounds. So you could be talking about something you saw in the news, have the screenshot of whatever drivel was written or something good. You can cut to a background of a politician that you're talking about. So you can really bring the screenshots, the receipts, so to speak, to cut into a story. And then you've got the element of somebody actually talking about that in front of the camera. You can see their expression, you can feel their emotion if they have any, and you've got all the information behind them to back it up. It's great to use in that sense, but some people just talk in front of the camera. Some people just do short clips with it'll have a meme, like a bit of a sound or something, and that will be a trend. But maybe just a short 10-second thing. But you can also talk for 3 minutes, which I think it's a good amount of time. It's not too long. People will sit through something for 3 minutes about politics. And it's a good chunk of time, I think, if you just want to cut to the heart of something and put it out there.
I'm interested in what you're finding is more effective. The podcast medium is, it is its own community as well. And what we've found is there are certain times of the year where our certain episodes, you want to hit on, right? And that will get huge downloads. Like we find that election campaigns are money for us. That just clearly our audience want to come here and hear folks talk about Labor Party campaigns. So whenever there's elections on, that's a good thing for us. And so we need to jump on that. We're not a kind of podcast that wants to just be like the news where we're responding to things immediately. Like we want to dive in and have a good yak with someone. Like it's an hour-long episode, for God's sake. Do you find with TikTok that what's more effective in terms of reactions from audiences that you've done stuff or you've trialed stuff and went, oh shit, that really went really, really well? Is it dependent on what you're producing, or does it depend on what's going on at the time, or is it a bit of both? Just talk to us a bit about that.
I'd say it's definitely a bit of both. So if you're posting something that's just happened, it's quite likely to go viral, depending on what it is, but it will usually go viral if it's just happened. But you've got to be really quick to that, because there are a lot of people doing the exact same thing. Election campaigns on TikTok, I think there is a boost to people engaging with politics, definitely, 100%. 100%, particularly with the federal campaign. It felt like, it probably is just my algorithm, but it kind of spread out to maybe people that don't talk about politics all of a sudden talking about politics. They might have an account about cooking, or they might be a penguin enthusiast. I don't know. But all of a sudden they're posting something about, Scott Morrison shit, get him out, and they're coming into your content. It's all, it's good. It's really great. It's really great, like community sort of building thing. But I find election campaigns, definitely there's much more engagement during those periods. But you can sort of just pluck out something completely random, and that will get some attention. I just one day, it was one of my favorites. It was just a Sunday afternoon. I've had a coffee. I'm sitting around, I'm like, who's cool? Joan Kerner. So I'm thinking, I don't think a lot of people, like younger people, I know the audience, I've got the older audience as well, but I'm like, a lot of young people wouldn't have a clue who Joan Kerner is. I'm just going to make a TikTok on Joan Kerner, like her life story, etc. And I've tied that into like, Julia Gillard, because a lot of people love Julia Gillard, especially on TikTok. I'm like, well, have you heard of Joan Kerner? And I've made this thing on her. It's great, going through all her achievements and whatnot. And then there's people coming in with their personal stories about interacting with Joan. And someone stitched it, and she's like, I think her father may have worked in the government in the 80s or something like that, and she knew Joan Kerner through her family. And she had this great story about, she was at school, young child, and for some reason her teacher had her outside of the classroom, maybe like in trouble or something, and Joan Kerner was coming to visit, and she knew. And she's outside the classroom, upset, crying and whatnot. Joan Kerner yells at the teacher, goes outside, gives her a hug, and brings her to the room. It's just like great stories like that.
Brilliant.
Popping up just from me sitting there and going, I'm going to talk about Joan Kerner. I'm going to make something on Joan Kerner all in the space of an hour or two. And next thing you know, you're getting stories like that out of people. And people are remembering Joan Kerner. People who didn't know about Joan are looking her up. It's a great way to sort of get, I think, the history of the Labor Party out there as well. Because you're not going to see that randomly written about in The Age or the Herald Sun, those kinds of places. You can pull something out from the past, something niche maybe. Another example would be this great clip of Kim Beazley just eviscerating Alexander Downer in Parliament, but he keeps cocking his leg up on the dispatch box thing in the middle and just relentlessly, his legs just all the way up in the air, and makes for a great clip. It's just something most people probably would never see, but you put it out there. It is quite funny to see. I don't think people are still putting their leg up there like that.
I think the Christian Times getting a pretty stale these days. That's fascinating, that Joan Kerner story, and the fact that you just sort of a Sunday afternoon sort of, I know what I do. I'm going to do a post on Joan Kerner. Do you find that, like with our podcast, we need to, I don't know why I'm comparing this to the podcast, but I'm just sort of grounding my own experience. We need to put out a show each week. And if we don't, then our numbers take a hit. So there is a need to feed our audience. they expect a show out every Friday morning, and if they don't, we notice it. So we don't miss episodes, right? For you, is there an expectation for you to put out content quite regularly, or is it kind of like Sunday afternoon, just had a coffee, want to do a post on Joan Kerner, and that's it, right? Or how are you structuring this? Like, because, clearly it's enjoyable, right? But you want to keep it to be enjoyable. You don't want to get to a point where this becomes, oh, fucking hell, this is laborious, right?
I think that regular posting, like once a day or every 2 days, is optimal. And you do notice a hit if you don't post as much. I've slacked off a little bit this year. I'm getting back into it now. But I was posting every day, maybe twice a day for quite a while, a very long period of time. I don't know how.
Yeah, it's remarkable. How long does it take to make a post?
Honestly, it's insane. It really varies. I could make something that's quite long and it takes me 15, 20 minutes. You're also getting your backgrounds, your information, what you want to say. I don't write a script or anything. It's just sort of all off the wall.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow,
There's been a few times where I've written something down I've thought of, but I've never actually gone off a script. It's sort of just all off the top of my head as I'm going.
That's impressive, because it seems to me that these are considered thoughts. I'm not suggesting you're actually reading off what you've written, but these are clearly considered thoughts. But if you're going off the top of your head, wow. Okay, sorry, continue.
Considered thoughts in the shower. I think that's, where it's done. You think about it in the shower, what you're going to say, and you get out talking to the hairbrush or something.
Nice. Very, the commitments of you. Continue. Yeah. Right. Okay. So 15 minutes to do something that's reasonably long. Otherwise, how long to just shoot something out quickly?
Sometimes it could take, though. It really varies, and I don't know why. I don't even know how long it's going to take me until I start. Sometimes it might be 2 hours. You might be looking for something from 20 years ago, an article or a screenshot, and that's taking forever. Or sometimes it's just not working. I never really know how long it's going to take. And it's interesting. You might just sort of quickly pop something out that's taken 5 minutes and it will just go insane. It'll go viral. And then another time you'll put a lot of effort into something and it just doesn't land right. It really just depends. I think with TikTok too, though, sometimes the algorithm, a post will be doing quite well, but it just doesn't push it out all the way. And other times it does when it's not doing as well. It's sort of like a bit of a system, I think, to game there. But consistent posting is important, I think, on TikTok. You want to be at least posting 2 or 3 times a week. But if you do have a break and you come back, sometimes it will really push out what you've got to say. It could also be that people just miss you being present there. As far as like podcast formats go, though, it also has like a live feature. So we've had plenty of lives discussing politics. I mean, you've had politicians on there. Julian Hill has done some lives. Quite a few Labor politicians have popped up, and their lives are quite boomer-esque, if you're asking me. But
and be critical by all means.
They're good. They're good. They just loosen up a little bit. But we've done a lot of lives. Gen Z for Albo would have to be the original Labor TikTok account, and one I could talk about at length. And we used to do a lot of lives. You'd impersonate politicians. You pose questions to people. It's all very like lighthearted and fun, but that really brings people in too. It's not all dry. It's not all just about serious things and policy and stuff. It could just be about something Michaelia Cash did years ago that's quite funny. There are a lot of like funny moments in politics that will go viral as well that you can post up there about. But like the story, as far as like Labor's presence goes on TikTok, it is, apart from like your official accounts, all the accounts that are just posting about Labor, it's just grassroots. It's purely just people, they might not be in the party. They might have no involvement in politics, but they'll get on there and talk about the Labor Party and why they support it, or why they don't support the Liberals, or why they don't support the Greens as well. There's even a section sort of for that kind of thing. But with Gen Z for Alba, I think he really wanted to dominate. I think after the 2019 election, I think be fair to say the Liberal Party with their meme machine, I can't remember the name of it, the one from New Zealand that was used in the UK as well. I think they kind of dominated on social media. And he saw it as like, well, we're not going to have that happen again. And I don't want the Greens to get a foothold on this platform. So he started posting, and a lot of his clips are just, they're, 10, 15 second, maybe a bit more trending kind of things, not talking about politics or anything like that. He's not on camera. But yeah, he really, I think, built this sort of wall on TikTok in politics that, this is Labor's space. And the Greens cough or sneeze, there's a post up making fun of them, and it's going viral.
That is interesting, because that was the thing that I think surprised me, because I guess I approached this from the lens of a party hack official, someone who went through Young Labor and student politics. And, I joined the Labor Party when I was still in my school uniform back in Warragul, and so it's not cynicism, it's disbelief that there can be people out there that are not members of the Australian Labor Party, are not politically engaged through the party process, but are rooting for to use an American term, but rooting for the Labor Party on social media, So when I saw yours come up, I was like, oh, this looks like just a regular rank bloke out there just talking about the Labor Party. I didn't know they existed, because normally it's either a politician, or if it's going to be from someone young, it's someone who's in Young Labor, and it's normally crap, because they're so involved in it. They don't know how to, do you know what I mean? Like, they don't know how to they're in this sort of halfway house of, oh, I'm a politician, but I'm 23. Why are you wearing a suit? That kind of thing.
I think it's certainly an interesting to think about, because if you haven't been funneled through student politics and this kind of lens, you're not worried about what you're going to say. You're not thinking twice, maybe sometimes, but you're not really putting too much thought into it. It's not going to cut your legs off, so to speak. You're not. You haven't been told sort of more, or we say things like this, or we don't want to talk about that. It's just do whatever, and it works quite well. I mean, it's a free expression, I suppose, and without all that sort of baggage attached to it.
That's such a key takeaway, that point there. Yeah, you're right, because that is one of the things that does hamstring us when I was certainly going through Young Labor, is you are kind of conditioned in a way to say this is the paradigm in which you need to fit within, and that isn't always a great thing, particularly when you're younger and you've got a lot of ideas. What do you think that there is are you persuading people out there, or are you just preaching to the converted, or what do you think's happening out there when you're actually putting your posts out there? Are you seeing people going, oh shit, I hadn't considered that, that's interesting?
I think there's a lot of preaching to the converted, but when something does go viral, you're getting a wide audience all of a sudden. People maybe who are not interested in politics will see it. It'll come up on their feed. Maybe they never really have Ozpoll come up on their feed, but it's a bit of both. It's a bit of both, I think, but you're definitely converting people on there. I had a lot of people, particularly during the federal campaign, say, well, I'm going to vote Labor now. I wasn't sure about it. I've never voted Labor. Hundreds of people saying things like that, literally hundreds. So it's almost like a digital door knock in a sense, except you're not knocking on their door. They're coming to see you. But yeah, you can certainly convert people to vote for Labor on there and pull people. I think there's not many Liberal voters on TikTok. The Liberals don't really have a presence on there, thankfully. And what little presence they do have is swarmed by apparatchiks, which is great to see.
Well, can I pick you up on that? Because I actually did want to ask you about that, because there was the Victorian Liberals hired someone who I think had an association with the Teals campaign out of the federal. So coming from the federal and into the state campaign, they hired a young woman, and she was the one that did let me tell you one thing about Dan.
Yes.
Which is an earworm that got stuck in my head at one point. For a week I couldn't get it out, and it was driving me insane. What do you think about the Tories' content?
garbage, out of touch, just like the party itself. And that particular cringe-worthy TikTok, like that was stitched by other people and, you know, kind of making fun of the Liberal Party and saying, what are you doing here? And those tend to garner more attention than that original post. So I think that their game on social media in general is awful.
Which is interesting because originally you said, 2019, to your point before, that they were seen as the gold standard. What's happened?
Honestly, I don't know. I think 2019 was a lot of, Shifty Shorten, you can't trust Bill. There's a lot of like shit tier sort of memes. I think they've just tried to continue that, not try and engage. Like they cannot engage with people online. We know that. If you ask them a question, if you challenge them, you're blocked. It's done. I don't think that they're able to engage with people online, and they don't want to. And their past has caught up with them because all of a sudden there's all these younger people that are informed and older people too. That the Liberals will make a post and the comment section is just full of people saying, well, that's not quite right or that's rubbish. I just seared into my mind, unfortunately, is the Solar Shaker fries, the Hungry Jacks ad that they did for the Victorian election camp. I'm just, who is this for? This is no one's going to look at this. It was some sort of climate package that the Victorian Liberal Party during the election campaign. It's shocking. It's cheap. It doesn't actually say anything. There's no emotional impact. It's not funny. I just miss all the beats.
Let's take a quick break to talk about SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust. Lists that are up to date, absolutely. Phone banks that can change minds. Emails that drive donations and events that will energize the community online and offline. And text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. And to find out more, go to swiftfoxcrm.com to win your next campaign. Okay, let's get back to the show. Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on Liberals themselves. But if we can talk more about sort of, I guess, broader thoughts on reflections on politics and where you are seeing the conversation going on social media platforms. When I worked for the party itself, I found that certainly all through the from 2010 to 2020 period, that decade there was a lot of trial and error from a party perspective, trying to work out what and even Facebook, the back end of Facebook kept on changing and evolving. So the way that we could actually engage with it, like using it from a data perspective, like years ago, you used to be able to match the role with people on Facebook, and then they dropped that. And so the way that you could use it as a campaign tool constantly changed. So therefore, you needed to constantly adapt. Thank God I wasn't a digital organizer; it would drive me insane. But I had a soft spot for the folk in our digital teams. Where is it going now? Like this is 2023. I just get a sense that like Facebook has just become this kind of like dead space for old people kind of thing. Where's the evolution of social media going as a tool for political content and communication and dialogue?
From a politician or party's perspective of engaging with the public, or just in general?
I want to hear from your perspective about where do you think it's going in terms of, because you are an active participant on it. So less about what the parties need to do, but where do you see it? Where are you going to continue to invest your time and energy and resource wanting to be effective out there and communicating with folks about politics and why you should vote Labor or why you should be conscious about the issues around your own community?
I think it's just all going to end up on TikTok, to be honest. Instagram's kind of become a bit stale. It's not really the greatest place for a conversation. Facebook, I think, is good. People wanting to get a lot of information out, but it's not really, it is a dead space. As far as Twitter goes, well, Twitter's going down the toilet. Who knows? A very volatile platform with Elon Musk now. I see TikTok as the future of engagement. I think there's a lot of people that don't realize like you can really talk with people as you would on Twitter. You might have a shorter character limit. It does not matter. You'll leave 3 or 4 comments as you block. it'll be responded to. Somebody can respond to you with a video talking to you. I think it's a better place to engage, actually, than Twitter. It's a bit more lighthearted too. It's a bit more personal. But I do see everything sort of moving over to TikTok. It's certainly not a platform just for videos. It is a platform for discussion, lengthy discussion. I don't really see. I think Twitter won't be as important to politics moving forward, unless something drastic changes on there. But I think it will. You'll get more people sort of move over in time. It still have its place. But
haven't we been sort of talking about the death of Twitter now for quite some time? Like, it seems like I remember listening to Bill Simmons. Well, I just remember listening to Bill Simmons podcasts in around 2012 where they were talking about, Twitter just can't keep up with Facebook, and it's gonna, its shares were going through the floor, and it's not going to be able to sustain itself as a business, and it's just going to fall over. And here we are 10 years later, and it's still here. But now it's owned by Elon Musk, and we're all, making all these prophecies that it's going to crash again. And it felt like maybe a month or 2 or 3 months ago that was the case. It was like, these are the last days. People were all jumping to that other platform and saying farewell. It was nice knowing you, but yet it's still there. I'm wondering if we're maybe jumping the gun a bit on that one.
It could be. I think Twitter's great. I think actually a lot of the time, if I'm making a TikTok, you'll go to Twitter because it's an easy place to gather all that information. And it'd be sad to see that go. Like, it definitely has its place. It's just the Elon Musk factor. I do have my concerns with what he is doing over there. But it is a great place to gather information. Just as far as engaging with people, though, I think you can engage with people on a far more personal level or emotional level on a platform like TikTok, just compared. But Twitter should always have its place. It probably won't die. It's just seeing, I know my feed's changed since Elon Musk took over. It doesn't seem to quite work as well. They want people paying for these blue ticks now. It has lost its way a bit.
Yeah, the blue tick thing actually is weird, right? Like, I mean, I never kind of liked the blue tick period. I just thought it was a bit elitist. But apparently, I remember reading a feed or an article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago about saying how critical the blue tick was in the early days in order to sort of boost, like, get little LeBron Jameses out there actually punching stuff out, actually made the platform work. But now that any random can get a blue tick, it's actually the complete opposite. It's actually killing the ability for the platform to work properly. So here is a money-making exercise that actually is hurting the business. Bizarre. There was an article that I read talking about how all this particular, I mean, they were mostly looking at Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, about how every time they get to a position where the algorithm is working for itself and doing well and everyone enjoys it, that they adjust it in a way that actually hurts it. And I think it's a nice way of saying every time the boomers come onto this platform, it kills it. But it's a bit more in depth than that. And I've noticed that, so the user experience is I like Instagram. It's the first thing I open in the morning. And the reason why I first liked Instagram was I just liked the pictures. It was kind of reasonably positive, like it was a nice thing to wake up to, right? And now I find that most of my feed is just full of a whole bunch of things I am not following. And I'm just like, I don't want this. I've curated this Instagram feed to reflect all of my sporting teams, fine whiskey, and, and some stuff on Irish politics, and that's about it, right? And I just want that. So why am I getting all this other shit? And it's starting to annoy me. And I'm wondering do we get to a point, though, that may happen to TikTok as well, that the people that run TikTok are going to start mucking around with the algorithm? The same problem, same curse that happened for these other platforms may happen for TikTok as well.
I think so. It seems to be the way of things, but I think that will be in quite some years. They're going to mess around and make something worse. I don't think that will be coming anytime soon. It might also be a difference in TikTok. Sort of seems a bit quite different to your American social media giants. There might be some different thinking that goes in there as well. Yeah.
Can we talk? Let's talk just mainstream politics for a moment. We've had Daniel Andrews on the podcast a couple of times. We did an episode last week with David Feeney talking about the milestone of the Andrews government and his reaching or surpassing John Cain as the longest-serving Labor Premier in the great state of Victoria over the Easter break. What do you think has made Daniel Andrews and the government successful amongst the community?
Consistency, I think, and honesty. I mean, I see Daniel Andrews quite an honest politician. I remember particularly at the start of COVID, March 2020, I feel like he was the first and maybe only leader to really just come out of the gate. And I remember him just saying, people will die. It wasn't people might die. You had everyone else saying, we're going to do the social distance dance. We're going to do this and stay in, thumbs up, all the rest of it. And here was somebody I felt like being quite honest about what was going to happen. I think always showing up as well. Didn't miss a beat during lockdown. But now that we're past all that too, just getting on with things, actually doing things that have a material benefit to people's lives, like removing level crossings, like funding hospitals, like talking about issues that people face and not being afraid to say so, not being afraid to stand by trans people, for example. I think people find that refreshingly honest. I think, that might have been seen as a gamble a few years ago. And here he is coming out and saying, we stand with trans people, we stand with whoever it might be. We're not going to let, people tear us apart. There's no real place for that in Victoria. I think that does bring people together.
There was something that David and I talked about in the show last week, which was that how historically, certainly in the Howard years, the Labor Party continued to get itself twisted into knots over a bunch of issues in which the Liberal Party were quite effective in wedging us. That doesn't happen here in Victoria with Daniel Andrews. And the Liberal Party have tried so many different times on issues and then in the end end up wedging themselves, which I think is hysterical. And I think a lot of that is down to just the strength of his leadership. To your point, the example of the trans community, sometimes, listening to what Anthony Albanese has said on it, you can see that he is, I won't say cautious with what he's saying, but he's certainly thinking about the sentences that he's saying. Then I know that Australia's a big country. We're not homogenous. What people think in far north Queensland is fundamentally different to what people think on Brunswick Street. So he has to have that in mind. I don't think Daniel ever thinks about that. I mean, I know he does think about that, but do you know what I mean? Like, I think he's quite clear on his values.
It's also a reflection on Victoria being the greatest state by a country mile. I think we're just more progressive down here.
Why is that, do you think? And I mean, do you actually think that? Because I do travel around the country a lot, and a lot of people outside of Victoria do think we are a socialist utopia, and I just think that is quite funny. That never was the case. I don't know why they think that now, but what is that? What's going on there? Is something in the water?
I honestly have no idea. Maybe it's just the city itself. There could be more room for discussion. I really have no idea, but I think that we are the most progressive state. And I get people, particularly on TikTok or whatever, if you talk about Daniel Andrews, I wish he was my premier. People from all around the country wish that was the case. So we're obviously doing something right.
It is interesting because to that point, certainly over the COVID experience nationally, there was such a admiration for the leadership of Andrews and the Andrews government here in Victoria from folks outside of our own state, which would seem weird given that we were all in lockdown and the rest of the country was running around having parties every day. But they all wanted our leadership. There's something not right. There's a counterintuitive to that. What's going on there? Why do people outside of the country, outside of our own state, really admire the leadership of Andrews and the government?
I think we've just reached a point. Labor governments are like steam trains. They take a while to build up. So we look back from 2014 to where we are now. We're getting a lot more SEC and so on. These kinds of big ideas, because there is a clear mandate from people in Victoria. You're building on the foundations of what you've laid out years before. We've sort of reached that pinnacle point. And I think having someone, a Labor leader that is quite brave and willing to push forward on things and really push the dial is a great thing. And people see that around the country and they want that for their state. I do think it takes time to build up, and it does require a certain kind of person, because you have to bring everybody along with you. You don't want to be pushing off big ideas and scaring people. They jump out of the car. But yeah, I think that's what is admired about Victoria. Just get on with doing these things.
Let's talk about something that we've held back for a bit, and I've been wanting to bring this to the last kind of subtopic, the media. I want to get your reflections on the mainstream media and their political coverage, and how online activists such as yourself and, the Friendly Geordies and Gen Z for Elbow and all of these kind of platforms out there that are communicating to an audience, giving information, how that is working in conjunction with mainstream media. And what do you think? What do you think people are seeing from media in terms of political content that they're not happy with, but are engaging with this kind of stuff that you're putting up, which is only like a 3-minute video, right? Like there's a journalist slaving away to write a piece of, the 2 or 3 columns for the week, and it gets absolutely shat on. And then here's you in the shower, think of a great idea, posting it up, and it gets a great response. What are you doing right that they're not?
Wearing, I think people want to see somebody wear their heart on their sleeve. Quite a lot of, I think, political conversation. It's just fence sitting. It's very milquetoast. It's blah, 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 blah. It's not really exciting or emotive. I don't think it speaks to people. I think people have their values and want to hear people that share their values. And it's also obviously important to look at the other side, people that might be quite different, like the Herald Sun, to keep an informed perspective, which is what I'm always telling people. They might say to me, oh, I haven't watched the news during this federal election campaign or state campaign. I've just watched you. And I'm like, don't do that. Go out there, consume a variety of sources, please. You don't want to stick to one thing. But I think that's a big part of it. The media plays it really safe. They're leaning obviously quite to the Teals or the Tories or the Greens, and it's just old. I think Tasmania's got a Liberal government, and that's it. So why are we always talking about Teals and Liberals and all of this, and through this sort of perspective? I don't think there's no pro-union media outlet. There's no pro-worker outlet. There's no pro-Labor outlet, which is why I think we're finding success online in talking about these kinds of things. It's not there, so we have to make it happen. And we have to keep it alive and build on it, because it's not going to be, the media is not going to be helping us. It's not going to be helping the average worker at all. I remember during the federal election campaign last year, there's a piece put out in the ABC. The ABC, it's pretty good. I think it has its issues, but it's fine. But there's a piece put out and saying there's no real contest of ideas this election campaign. And I thought it was quite sad and dismissive, because here you have a Labor Party talking, we want to fix aged care. And there's people living in these horrible conditions. They've got no nutritional food. These, coming in with climate policy for the first time in a decade, talking about raising wages after a decade of wage stagnation. These are things that are really important to people. And I thought, what contest of ideas are they looking for? If they're talking about a Tesla battery being installed in their home, subsidised or something like it, is that exciting to somebody from perhaps a media class or an upper class? They want things like that, but these real things that actually help people are just being overlooked because they're not exciting. They're not necessarily sexy to people. You might have the Greens come out with slogans like free mental and dental and we're going to build 1 million homes. And they are just slogans. Like there's no intention of them following through on anything like that or appealing to a majority of voters to be able to do something like that. I think it was pretty sad to see that there was no contest of ideas, so to speak. I think there was a contest of ideas, and it was, do we want to build the foundations back where we look after old people, where we pay people decent wages, or do we want to keep going the way that we are?
There was I saw on Twitter in the lead up, maybe it was actually on election day or in the final day, someone tweeted who lives in Aston was saying that we kind of all, the citizens of Aston, all kind of felt like animals at the zoo, and everyone was coming to look at them, and everyone being the media, the way that they sort of set up, prodding the outer suburban voter, look, let's go like Richard Attenborough, let's go, or David Attenborough, whoever is the environmentalist, like doing documentaries on this is the Aston voter in the wild going to the shopping centre, kind of thing. And they were like, what are you doing? Like, we're just regular voters. This is suburban life. Like, where the hell have you been? Like, you're all probably living in, I'd imagine,
near Rashada Campbell.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I'm not not all journalists. I like that. There are some great journalists out there.
Definitely.
They've got a great lens or eye and ear for an issue. Great writers or great communicators, and can just give the news straight, right, and let voters then decide. They're few and far between, though. And I'm not even talking about the Herald Sun. Right? I mean, the Herald Sun basically now are, to quote Steve Brack's election night, irrelevant. But they're a parody. They're a parody account basically for the Liberal Party.
Yeah, I think people have realised that too. They've flown too close to the sun.
Yeah, and I think they've been propped up basically by contracts with Woolies and Coles to
Harvey Norman.
Yeah. And the Supercoach, people are just getting it for Supercoach, right? Otherwise, you took those things out of it, then I don't think they'd be selling like 30 copies a week. It's the Age, because they do the Age. Here's what the Age do. The Age is like that prick at school who would be going around and doing all the bullying behind the scenes without anyone knowing, and then trying to in front of the teacher saying that they're about leadership and stuff. No, you're a prick.
Yeah,
they're the ones, because eventually. The state campaign, early doors, right? They were just as up to their eyeballs in absolute blatant biased reporting, and then eventually did that moment where they went, "Oh, geez, aren't the Herald so bad about the way they're recovering the election campaign?" And going, "Hang on a minute, big fella, you were just as complicit in this as well. Don't try and then And they were writing about it a lot. The only one that does it, Margaret, who writes for the Guardian, I forgot her surname, Margaret Simon, is it? She's one of the few journalists who said, everyone's involved in this. This is a cartel of shit journalism, and that's the one that doesn't get retweeted by all the journalists. The ones that get all retweeted by, so true.
The circle jerk, the patting on the back.
Yeah.
The consoling. I think a great example of that. I mean, Costello's media output, it's tops in turtlenecks. It's not I don't think it is for most people. It's a lot more. They do sometimes some all right things. Congratulations for the bare minimum there. But a great example would be Paul Keating getting up at the NPC the other week and hitting back at the journalist. Quite fair. I think it was something we've all missed seeing. And to see, I can't remember who it was. It was someone from the Sydney Morning Herald, but you can see him gulp when he finishes his question. And then he has to sort of back himself up. Like, well, we do great journalism. And all of a sudden there's this tweet chain of all these journalists saying, it wasn't fair. Paul was so mean to us and we went there to hold him to account. I'm thinking, hold him to account for what? He's not in government. He's gone there to talk to you about submarines. What's he being held to account for? Like, his hands aren't on the levers of power or anything like that. And it's really important we go there and hold him to account. All this sort of nonsense. I think the patting on the back that they do and the consoling, I love it though. I think it really just separates them and everyone can see it. It's like, okay.
It is true. It is fun. I don't think we've spoken about this on the show. We haven't really had an opportunity. Yes, the Paul Keating National Press Club was the best. I am a self-professed. I love Paul Keating. I joined the Labor Party because of Paul Keating. He was my hero as a kid, right? Loved Paul Keating. I used to get my dad to tape Question Time because it was only on at 11 o'clock at night. I'd watch it the next day just to watch, Paul Keating in the theatre, right? Do you know what I love about this? Keating didn't even bother going to Canberra. Someone said, can you appear for the National Press Club? Sure, I will, but I'm not leaving Sydney. Just give me a comfy chair in the studios, the ABC in Sydney, and I'll do it remotely, right? So then he's sitting in his comfy chair with probably a nice little cup of tea beside him, and then just watching all these journalists, I was about to say tourists, all these journalists, front up and get berated by the former Prime Minister, ding, next, right. Oh, I've got something to say to you. You should hang your head in shame with the things that you have written in the last 2 weeks. Ding, next. Oh, you're an idiot. You're just a complete idiot. Ding, next. Like it was classic Keating, and I loved every moment of it. I wish we could do that every week.
I think it was great. I mean, I think Paul really, I was going through that Paul Keating binge phase on YouTube. There's so many great clips of Paul, which is another great thing I'll do on TikTok is I'll pull out an old clip from 1995 or something, Paul Keating saying one thing, post that up. A lot of people wouldn't have seen it. But just, hearing him destroy people, I mean, I think that kind of got me in to wanting to talk about politics as well. I find listening to a lot of what he's got to say, it's almost like listening to music. I don't feel like I'm listening to a politician. It's like watching an art form unfold.
PJK would love you saying that too, by the way. I thought about this, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on this before we wrap up. I wonder how a politician like Paul Keating would have gone in today's social media landscape. Because in the 1990s, we didn't have social media, and the news came through a very, very filtered, newspapers, radio, and 3 or 4 television stations, and that's it. And by the time we got to the 1996 election, the media had framed Paul Keating up as arrogant and out of touch. And the 1996 election was an absolute hiding to nothing. But one of the strengths, I think, of social media is this consumption for, there's these viral grabs that people do, whether it be a politician or a celebrity or even just a regular mum having some sort of laugh with their kid, right? It's the viralness of social media that makes it a success. Paul Keating would be constantly giving us viral moments that we could just devour and love, and it would be straight through to the audience. And I think it would come across no longer as arrogant, but as just straight talking Paul Keating, which is an asset that people want in leadership. I don't think Daniel Andrews is any different. Like the great example of it was the press conferences during the lockdowns. We were just getting Daniel Andrews. We weren't getting the Herald Sun's version of Daniel Andrews or the Age's version of Daniel Andrews. We were getting Daniel Andrews, and guess what? People liked it. And do you know why I know they liked it? Because they voted for him in spades last night. Yeah. Paul Keating, what do you think about that? I mean, if he was in today's landscape, just watching that press club go off on social media where people just love Paul, miss Paul.
Yeah. I think he'd do just fine. A lot of people say that Julian Hill has a huge presence on TikTok and online in general. And a lot of people compare him to Paul Keating. So if maybe that's the closest thing we've got to seeing something like that. I don't think it's quite the same. But there's a point there. I think that there is some similarities. He's very straight talking and quick-witted, very sharp. And he puts out a lot of content, and it does very, very well. So I think it would work. I think people like seeing it too, because you're not getting this through the lens of the media. You're just getting it from the politician, and they're not necessarily always speaking in political speak. You can see when somebody's just honed in like a laser and just making their point because they believe their point.
And I think Australians have also just got zero tolerance for bullshit.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
That's one thing I've always liked about the Australian electorate is that just don't bullshit a bullshitter. There's only so much you can get away with, and you get found out pretty quickly. One of the things why I think that actually we should have primaries in the Labor Party in terms of selection is get our candidates in front of our membership and our broader supporter base in that selection process, because that'll test you whether or not you've got the makings. That'll test you if you've got the makings to be a politician to represent a constituency, right? Anyway. maybe we'll save that for the How Do We Reform the Labor Party podcast. PoggersMagoo, Matt, it's been great to sit down and have a bit of a chat with you, good old fellow West Gippslander. Wonderful to have you on the show. Can I ask you to give your, we'll probably put all the links to the social handles in the bio, but please give yourself a bit of a plug on some of the things that how you want people to come and follow you. How do we find you on social media is what I'm trying to say.
Yep. So you go on TikTok. I'm trying to consolidate all my names. On TikTok, it's Comrade_Matt. And that's really where you'll see me put out content. But on Twitter, it's PoggersMagoo, which is a silly name. And that's where you can find me.
Where did PoggersMagoo? PoggersMagoo sounds very Gippsland, by the way. It sounds like, actually, when I first heard it, I thought, I reckon he's from near him south, but I was a little bit off by about 40 Ks.
Poggers just basically was a sort of internet meme term that just meant excited, and then I just thought I'll just throw Magoo on the end. That sounds so stupid. I'm not taking that seriously. I'm kind of embarrassed that it's still up there.
Love it. Own it. It's real. It's beautiful. Matt, lovely to have you on the show. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to come and have a chat to us. We wish you the best of luck with all the work that you're doing, the great work you're doing for the progressive side of politics on social media, and we'd love to have you back on the show in the near future.
Cheers. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Socially Democratic. Did you like the podcast? Hit the follow or subscribe button and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. And to get all the latest on Socially Democratic, follow Dunn Street on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we'll see you next Friday. Socially Democratic was brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn Lawyers have spent more than a century paving the hard path to justice for everyday Australians. They've helped over 500,000 Australians turn their situation around, and they know how the system works. Their experience and skills means you'll get the best results possible. Find out more on their website, mauriceblackburn.com.au. Maurice Blackburn, experience you can count on. Socially Democratic was brought to you by SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust, lists that are up to date, phone banks that can change minds, emails that drive donations, events that will energize the community online and offline, and text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. To find out more, go to swiftfoxcrm.com to win your next campaign.